The studio lights in Studio C were tuned to a warmth that usually signaled intimacy, a golden hue designed to make guests feel like they were sitting in a living room rather than a soundstage in the heart of Manhattan. The air conditioning hummed a low, subterranean bass note, barely audible beneath the roar of the audience. They were on their feet, a sea of excited faces, camera phones held aloft like lighters at a concert. The energy was frantic, almost hysterical. It was the kind of reception reserved for true A-listers, the kind of stars whose gravity pulled the oxygen right out of the room. And Jason Momoa was certainly that. He entered not with a walk, but with a saunter, a rolling oceanic gait that made the tailored charcoal suit he wore look restrictive, like wrapping paper struggling to contain a landslide. He was immense, radiating a physical charisma that the cameras loved, but could never quite capture in 3 dimensions. His hair was loose, a dark mane that caught the studio lights, and his smile was a blinding, practiced weapon. He waved, pointed at a screaming fan in the front row, and brought his hands together in a gesture of gratitude that felt both humble and theatrical. Sitting across from him, in the pristine, cream-colored chair that served as her command post, Tamron Hall waited. She was smiling, clapping along with the audience, but her eyes were different. While the crowd saw the movie star, the superhero, the rugged icon of masculinity, Tamron was watching the man. She noted the slight tension in his shoulders, the way his knuckles were a shade too white as he gripped the back of the guest chair before sitting. She saw the tightness around his eyes that the smile didn't quite reach. She was a veteran journalist, a woman who had cut her teeth in the trenches of hard news before moving to daytime, and she knew the difference between a guest who was happy to be there and a guest who was performing happiness. Jason sat, and the chair creaked audibly under his frame. He leaned back immediately, claiming the space, spreading his arms along the top of the sofa in a posture of relaxed dominance. It was a power move, subtle but undeniable. He was telling the room without speaking a word that this was his house for the next 20 minutes. "Jason Momoa," Tamron said, her voice cutting through the applause, smooth and rich. "The man, the myth, the legend. Welcome back to the show." "Good to be here, Tamron," Jason rumbled. His voice was a baritone scrape, deep and textured. "Always a party with you. Look at this crowd. They're beautiful." He flashed that grin again toward the audience, and the cheers spiked, a fresh wave of adoration crashing over the stage. "They love you," Tamron acknowledged. Samoahem and Randalaj leaning forward slightly afar, her posture impeccable. "And why wouldn't they? You've got the #1 movie in the world right now. Dominion is breaking box office records in 20 countries. You're producing, you're starring, you're writing. It feels like you're building an empire." Jason chuckled, a low rolling sound. He picked up the mug of water on the table, taking a sip before answering. "I don't know about an empire, just telling stories, stories that matter, stories that have heart. That's all I've ever wanted to do. I'm just a kid from Iowa and Hawaii trying to make art." It was the perfect answer. Humble, relatable, grounded. The audience ate it up. A few people said, "Aw," audibly. It was the script he had been following for the last 3 weeks of the press tour. The charming rogue with the poet's soul. Tamron nodded, her expression supportive. "And Dominion certainly has heart. It's a film about protecting the land, about legacy. You've been very vocal that this is a personal project for you, deeply tied to your heritage." "Absolutely," Jason said, shifting his weight, crossing one massive leg over the other. "It's about the Aina, the land. It's about what we leave behind for our children. You can't just take. You have to give back. That's the message." "That message clearly resonates," Tamron said. She glanced down at her notes, a small, deliberate movement. The blue index cards were stacked neatly. She tapped the top edge of the stack on the glass table. "You've become a global face for environmental activism. You've spoken at the UN. You've protested on the front lines. People look to you as a moral compass on these issues." Jason nodded solemnly, putting a hand over his heart. "I take that responsibility seriously, Tamron. It's not a game to me. It's my life." The interview was 5 minutes in. To the casual viewer, it was going perfectly. To the producers in the control booth, watching the monitors with headsets pressed to their ears, it was smooth sailing. But Tamron shifted. It was a micro-adjustment, a straightening of the spine, a subtle hardening of the jaw. She placed the index cards down on the table, separating her hands. That responsibility, Tamron repeated, her tone shifting from promotional to inquisitorial. The drop in temperature was slight but noticeable. It's interesting you use that word because when you hold yourself up as a moral compass, the needle has to point true. Jason's smile faltered for a fraction of a second. It didn't disappear, but it froze. He tilted his head, his eyes narrowing behind the tinted lenses of his glasses. Sure, he said, the word drawn out. Always. I want to talk about the Nepali coast, Tamron said. The silence that followed was not the silence of an empty room. It was the silence of a held breath. The Nepali Coast Project was a controversy that had been bubbling in the back pages of industry trade magazines and local Hawaiian papers, but it hadn't hit the mainstream daytime circuit. Until now. Jason shifted again. This time he uncrossed his legs. He placed both feet flat on the floor, grounding himself. Beautiful place, he said, his voice flat. Sacred. It is, Tamron agreed. And it's also the site of the new Momoa Hale Eco Resort you announced last week. A $300 million luxury development. You called it a sanctuary for preservation. That's what it is, Jason said quickly, cutting her off. It's sustainable. Solar, zero waste. We're doing it right. That's the press release, Tamron said. She wasn't smiling anymore. Her gaze was locked on his, steady and unblinking. But I have a statement here from the local council of elders in that district. They aren't calling it a sanctuary. They're calling it an eviction. The audience, previously warm and raucous, seemed to freeze. The sudden pivot from movie promotion to real-world conflict disoriented them. You could hear the shifting of bodies and seats, the rustle of clothes. Jason let out a short, sharp exhale. He looked toward the audience, then back to Tamron, his charm shielding cracking. Tamron, look, development is complicated. You can't please everyone. The elders, there are different factions. We're working with the community, not against it. Are you? Tamron asked. She didn't let the question hang. She pursued it. Because the records show that 42 families are being relocated to build the access road for your resort. These are families who have lived on that land for generations. You just said, not 2 minutes ago, that you can't just take. How is moving 42 families to build a luxury hotel consistent with that philosophy? Jason's physical demeanor changed completely. The relaxed, sprawling posture vanished. He leaned forward, his elbows resting on his knees, invading Tamron's personal space. It was an intimidation tactic, conscious or not. He lowered his voice, making it sound confidential, though he was wearing a lavalier microphone that picked up every gritty frequency. We aren't throwing anyone out, Jason said, his voice tight. We are relocating them to modern housing. We are building infrastructure. We are bringing jobs to an area that is starving for them. And you're reading a headline, Tamron. You don't know the ground game. I know what the families are saying, Tamron countered, her voice remaining perfectly level, refusing to be bullied by his physical proximity. I spoke to one of the matriarchs this morning, Auntie Pua. She said you came to her house 3 years ago, sat at her table, ate her food, and promised you would protect the coastline from developers. She says now you are the developer. Jason flinched. The mention of a specific name, a specific betrayal, hit a nerve. He looked away, his jaw working. He rubbed his beard with a large, heavy hand. Auntie Pua she's emotional. She doesn't understand the economics of preservation. If we don't buy that land, a megacorp from the mainland buys it and turns it into a concrete jungle. I'm the lesser of two evils here. The lesser of two evils, Tamron repeated slowly, letting the phrase hang in the air like smoke. That's a very different slogan than protector of the earth, isn't it? Don't twist my words, Jason snapped. It was the first time his voice had risen. The charm was gone. The cool guy was gone. In his place was a man who was used to being obeyed, used to controlling the narrative, and who was finding himself trapped. I'm doing the best I can in a corrupt system. I'm trying to save the land by making it profitable enough to exist. That's the reality of the world. You think I want to build a hotel? I have to. You have to? Tamron challenged. Jason, you're worth uncounted millions. You command $20 million of film. You could buy that land and leave it wild. You could donate it to a trust. Why build a $5,000 a night resort? Jason glared at her. The studio was dead silent. No one was cheering now. The air felt thin, electric. He looked at the producers behind the cameras, silently pleading for a commercial break, a cut, an intervention. But the red lights on the cameras stared back, unblinking eyes recording every second of his discomfort. It's not that simple, Jason muttered, leaning back again, crossing his arms over his chest. A defensive wall. You don't understand the financing. You don't understand the partners involved. Then help us understand, Tamron pressed. She was relentless. Because from the outside, it looks like you are monetizing your heritage for a project that excludes the very people you claim to represent. You talk about aloha spirit in your marketing. Is charging $5,000 a night aloha? Jason's eyes flashed behind his glasses. He took off the glasses, revealing eyes that were dark with anger. He placed the glasses on the table with a clatter that echoed through the microphones. You know, he said, his voice dropping to a low, dangerous rumble. I came here to talk about a movie. I came here to talk about Dominion. I didn't come here to be ambushed about a real estate deal that is still in negotiations. This is cheap, Tamron. This is gotcha journalism. Tamron didn't flinch. She didn't apologize. She didn't soften. It's not an ambush, Jason. It's accountability. You put your name and your face on this project. You used your activism to sell it. When you use your credibility as currency, you can't get upset when people check the exchange rate. My credibility is fine, Jason spat. I've done more for the ocean than any reporter in a studio in New York. I've been out there. I've pulled plastic out of the reefs with my bare hands. What have you done? It was a deflection, a classic ad hominem attack designed to put the interviewer on the defensive. Tamron recognized it instantly. She smiled, but it was a cold, professional smile. I'm not the one building a resort on sacred land, she said softly. The audience gasped. It was a collective intake of breath that sucked the air out of the room. Jason looked as if he had been slapped. His face flushed a dark red under his tan. He stared at her, his mouth slightly open, searching for a comeback, searching for the moral high ground and finding nothing but slippery slopes. You think you know everything, Jason said, shaking his head. You sit in this chair, under these lights, and you judge. You judge men who are actually out there doing the work. It's easy to criticize. It's hard to build. It's harder to lose your home, Tamron said. Jason stood up. He didn't storm off, not yet. He stood up and paced a small circle behind his chair, like a caged tiger. He ran his hands through his hair, messing up the stylist's work. He was visibly agitated, his large frame pacing the small confines of the interview set. The camera operators scrambled to adjust, the frames widening to catch his movement. I don't have to listen to this, Jason said, turning his back to her. I really don't. I thought we were friends, Tamron. I thought you respected me. I respect the truth, Tamron said to his back. And if the truth upsets you, Jason, maybe you should ask yourself why. He spun around, pointing a finger at her. The truth? The truth is that I'm saving that coast. The truth is that without me, that land is a parking lot for a Walmart. I'm the savior of that valley, and you're trying to paint me as the villain. A savior who evicts 42 families? Tamron asked. She remained seated, anchoring the scene. Her stillness was the perfect foil to his motion. Does a savior need a luxury spa? Jason scoffed, a harsh, dismissive sound. You're fixated on the luxury. You're obsessed with the money. That's your problem, Tamron. You can't see the vision because you're too focused on the price tag. I'm focused on the hypocrisy, Tamron said. The word hung there. Hypocrisy. It was the word that had been dancing around the edges of the conversation, and now it was center stage. Jason looked at her, and for a moment, the mask dropped completely. There was no movie star left, just a man who had been caught, A man whose carefully constructed narrative of the eco-warrior king was unraveling on live television. He looked tired. He looked old. He walked back to the chair and sat down, but not with the confidence of the opening. He slumped. He looked at the floor. "You don't get it," he whispered. "You just don't get it." "Then explain it," Tamron said. Her voice softened, offering him a lifeline, a chance to redeem the moment, to offer genuine vulnerability instead of defensiveness. "Tell us why this is different, without the spin, without the anger. Just tell us the truth." Jason looked up. His eyes met hers. For a second, it seemed like he might do it. It seemed like he might drop the ego and admit the complexity, admit the compromise, admit that he was torn. The audience leaned in, desperate for that moment of connection. But then the wall went back up. The pride kicked in. "I don't owe you an explanation," Jason said, his voice hardening into stone. "And I don't owe them one either." He gestured vaguely at the camera. "My work speaks for itself. If you can't see the good I'm doing, that's on you. I'm done defending myself to people who do nothing but talk." He looked at his watch, a massive, chunky timepiece. "I think we're done here." "We have 2 segments left," Tamron said calmly. "We haven't talked about the film's production or the afternoon." "I said we're done," Jason said. He didn't shout, but the finality in his tone was absolute. He stood up again, buttoning his jacket with trembling fingers. "You want to run a hit piece? Go ahead, run it. But I'm not going to sit here and be your punching bag for ratings." He turned to the audience. He didn't smile. He didn't wave. He just looked at them with a mixture of disappointment and disdain, as if they had failed him by listening to her. "Enjoy the movie," he said flatly. "It's a good movie." And then he walked. He didn't run. He didn't storm. He walked with long, heavy strides toward the wings of the stage. The silence in the studio was deafening. No one clapped. No one booed. They were simply stunned into paralysis. They watched his back retreat, the broad shoulders disappearing into the shadows of the backstage area. Tamron Hall sat alone on the stage. The empty chair across from her seemed to vibrate with the residual energy of the confrontation. A lesser host might have panicked. A lesser host might have thrown to commercial immediately or made a joke to break the tension. Tamron did neither. She looked at the empty chair for a long beat, letting the image burn itself into the minds of the millions watching at home. Then she turned slowly to the camera, her face composed, her expression unreadable, but grave. "When we invite guests onto this platform," Tamron said, her voice steady, resonant in the quiet room, "we do so with the expectation of a conversation, not a coronation. We ask the questions that you, at home, are asking. We seek the truth behind the press release." She paused, glancing down at her hands, then back up. The camera zoomed in slowly, capturing the intensity in her eyes. "Jason Momoa is a man of great passion," she continued, "and passion, when challenged, often looks like defense. But the questions we ask today about the Nepali coast, about the families, about the land, those questions remain, and they remain unanswered." She picked up her notes and tapped them on the table again, a sound that felt like a gavel striking a block. "Celebrity is a powerful spotlight," Tamron said, "but it is not a shield. We'll be right back." The director cut to black. The feed on YouTube didn't go to commercial. It lingered for a second on the wide shot of the studio, the stunned audience, the empty guest chair, and Tamron Hall sitting in the center of the storm, unmoving, unshaken, and entirely alone. The comments section on the live stream was moving so fast it was a blur of text, a digital riot of opinion, shock, and debate. But in the studio, there was only the heavy, suffocating weight of reality. The show had gone off the rails, but in doing so, it had arrived somewhere far more real than any scripted promo tour could ever hope to reach. The floor director walked out, looking pale. "We're clear," he whispered. Tamron let out a long breath, her shoulders dropping just an inch. She looked at the empty water mug Jason had left behind. "Well, wife," she murmured to herself, the microphone still live for the control room to hear. That happened. She reached for her own water, took a sip, and began to prepare for the next segment. The show, after all, must go on. But everyone knew as the lights dimmed for the break that the broadcast had changed. The glossy veneer of daytime TV had been scratched, and through the tear, everyone had seen something raw, ugly, and undeniably human. The silence in the studio stretched on, waiting for the red light to turn back on. The aftermath of the segment was immediate, even within the insulated bubble of the studio. During the commercial break, the atmosphere was thick, almost viscous. The audience, usually coached by a hype man to keep their energy up during the downtime, sat in a confused stupor. The warm-up comic, a man named Steve who usually juggled jokes about bad dating apps and subway delays, stood by the edge of the bleachers, clutching his microphone, looking at the stage manager for direction. There was no direction. The script had been incinerated. Tamron remained in her chair. Makeup artist rushed in, dabbing at her forehead, checking the shine on her nose, adjusting the lapel of her blazer. She stared straight ahead, her mind undoubtedly replaying the tape, analyzing the beats, the pivots, the moments where the conversation had shifted from dialogue to duel. She wasn't rattled, she was too experienced for that, but she was vibrating with the adrenaline of the kill. Not that she had wanted to kill the interview, but when the animal charges, you have to fire. In the control booth, the executive producer, Bill, was barking orders. Get the legal team on the phone now. I want to know if he signed a release. I want to know if we can air the second half of that conversation. And get me a breakdown of the Momoa Hale contract details. If he disputes the 42 family stat, I want the receipts ready for the post-show wrap-up. Back on stage, the floor manager, a woman with a headset and a clipboard that she was gripping like a shield, approached Tamron. T, she whispered, leaning in so the audience wouldn't hear. He's in the green room. He's not leaving. His publicist is screaming at the booking producer. They want the tape pulled. Tamron's eyes flicked to the side. We're live, Sarah. There is no tape to pull. It went out. They want us to scrub the YouTube upload. They want an apology on air after the break. Tamron turned her head slowly to look at Sarah. The look was withering. I asked him a question about a public development project. He chose to walk. If he wants to come back out and finish the answer, the chair is empty. Tell him that. Sarah swallowed hard, nodded, and scurried away. 2 minutes, the stage manager yelled. 2 minutes to air. The audience began to murmur again. The shock was wearing off, replaced by the thrill of witnessing a train wreck. This was the story they would tell at dinner parties for years. I was there when Momoa walked out. Tamron took a deep breath, centering herself. She adjusted her earpiece. Bill, she said quietly, talk to me. What are we doing? Bill's voice crackled in her ear. We're pivoting. Next guest is delayed because of the commotion backstage. We need you to fill 3 minutes. Do a recap. Contextualize it. Don't apologize. Stand by the journalism. Then we go to the cooking segment. Copy, Tamron said. 30 seconds. The red lights on the cameras blinked to life, a warning system engaging. The audience, sensing the return, began to clap, but it was a hesitant, disjointed applause. They weren't sure if they were supposed to be happy or solemn. In 5, 4, 3, the stage manager counted down silently with fingers. The camera swept in. Tamron looked into the lens, her expression serious but inviting. Welcome back, she said. If you're just joining us, we had a spirited discussion with Jason Momoa moments ago. Live television is unpredictable. It is unscripted, and sometimes it is uncomfortable. She clasped her hands. We were discussing the development of a resort on the Nepali coast, a project that has drawn criticism from local indigenous groups. Jason strongly disagrees with that criticism, as is his right. We invited him to share his perspective. He chose to end the interview early. She paused, letting the weight of the statement land. This show is a place for dialogue, she continued. We don't shy away from the hard questions because we believe you, the viewer, deserve the full picture. We respect Jason's work, and we respect his passion. But passion does not exempt anyone from answering for their actions. The invitation stands. If Jason or his team would like to return to provide the specifics on the housing for those displaced families, this chair remains open. She gestured to the empty seat. The camera lingered on it, a void in the carefully curated set. Moving on, Tamron said, her voice brightening by a fraction, a masterful gear shift. We often talk about heat in the kitchen, and today we have plenty of it. Chef Marcus Samuelson is here to show us a spicy Ethiopian stew that might be the only thing hotter than the first half of this show. The audience laughed. It was a nervous release, a tension breaker. They applauded, grateful for the permission to relax, grateful for the return to the familiar rhythms of daytime TV. But backstage, the drama was far from over. Jason was pacing the small beige-green room, his jacket discarded on the floor. His publicist, a sharp-featured woman named Elena, was on two phones at once, her voice a hiss of frantic damage control. "No, I don't care what she asked," Elena snapped into her iPhone. "It was an ambush. We agreed to talk about the movie. No, do not put out a statement yet. Let me fix this." Jason wasn't listening to her. He was staring at the monitor on the wall, watching Tamron transition to the cooking segment. He watched her smile, watched her chop onions with the chef, watched her command the room with an ease that infuriated him. "She set me up," Jason muttered. He grabbed a bottle of water from the craft services tray and crushed the plastic in his grip. "She waited until I was comfortable, and then she shanked me." "It's going viral," Elena said, lowering the phone. She looked pale. "Twitter is trending. Momoa walks is #1. Hashtag Tamron truth is #2. "What are they saying?" Jason demanded. "Read it." "Jason, you don't want to?" "Read it," his voice boomed in the small room. Elena scrolled, her thumb trembling. "Most people are confused. Some are saying you looked guilty. If he had nothing to hide, why did he run?" That's the main sentiment. People are pulling up the articles about the Nepali coast. The links to the Council of Elders website are crashing from traffic. Jason sank onto the sofa, putting his head in his hands. The adrenaline was fading, leaving behind a cold, sick feeling in his gut. He realized with a dawning horror that he had played exactly the role Tamron had cast him in. By walking out, he hadn't looked strong. He had looked like a coward. "I need to go back out there," Jason said suddenly. He stood up. "I need to fix it." "You can't," Elena said. "They're cooking stew. It's over. If you go back out there now, you look desperate. We have to leave. We have to issue a controlled statement. We frame it as a misunderstanding of time constraints or creative differences." "Creative differences?" Jason laughed, a bitter bark. "In an interview? No one buys that, Elena." He looked at the door. He could hear the muffled sounds of the show continuing. The laughter, the clinking of pans. The world was moving on without him, judging him in his absence. "She called me a hypocrite," he whispered. She didn't use the word, but she said it. "She did," Elena admitted, "and you proved her right by leaving." Jason stared at her, betrayed by his own team. But he knew she was right. "Get the car," he said softly. As Jason Momoa exited the studio through the rear loading dock, shielding his face from the few paparazzi who had already gathered based on the Twitter rumors, he felt a strange sensation. It wasn't just anger, it was the feeling of a pedestal crumbling. For 10 years, he had been the untouchable, cool guy, the unproblematic fave, the hero. It had taken Tamron Hall exactly 12 minutes to dismantle it. Back on stage, the show was wrapping up. The cooking segment had been a success, though the energy was still jittery. Tamron stood center stage for the sign-off. "That's our show for today," she said, facing the camera. "We laughed, we cooked, and we had some real talk. Remember, the conversations that matter are rarely the easy ones, but they are the ones worth having." She smiled, a genuine, tired smile. "I'm Tamron Hall. See you tomorrow." The credits rolled. The audience cheered, louder this time, a release of pent-up emotion. Tamron stayed on her mark until the floor director yelled, "And we're clear!" Only then did she slump. She let out a long exhale, blowing a strand of hair out of her face. She walked over to the desk where her notes still sat. She picked up the blue index card with the research on the Nepali coast. It was dense with facts, figures, and quotes. She had memorized it all, prepared for a fight she hoped wouldn't happen, but knew was inevitable. Bill, the producer, came down from the booth. He walked up to her and stood there for a moment. "You okay?" he asked. "I'm fine," Tamron said. "How are the numbers?" "Through the roof," Bill said quietly. "YouTube views on the clip are at 2 million and climbing. It's going to be the biggest segment of the year, maybe the decade." Tamron nodded slowly. She didn't look triumphant. She looked thoughtful. He could have answered, she said almost to herself. He had the platform. He could have explained the nuance. He could have turned it around. Ego is a hell of a drug, Bill said. It wasn't just ego, Tamron said, looking at the empty guest chair one last time. It was fear. He realized that the story he tells himself didn't match the story on the paper, and he couldn't look at the paper. She gathered her things. The studio was emptying out. The lights were being powered down, shifting from the golden broadcast hue to the harsh blue-white of the work lights. The magic was gone, leaving only the machinery of the set exposed. Tamron walked toward the exit, her heels clicking on the polished floor. She passed a monitor that was replaying the feed. She saw herself calm and steady, and Jason, large and looming, then retreating. She paused for a second, watching the moment he turned his back. "Next time," she whispered to the screen. "Don't run." She turned and walked out of the studio, into the hallway where the real world waited. The confrontation was over, but the conversation, the one she had started, the one the audience was now having in millions of threads and texts and posts, was just beginning. And that, she knew, was the job. Not to make friends, but to make people think. And today, Jason Momoa was thinking. The audience was thinking. And Tamron Hall was already thinking about tomorrow's show. The screen faded to black. Now it's your turn. Did Tamron ambush Jason, or did she just do the job that so many other journalists are afraid to do? Was Jason right to protect his peace and walk away? Or did his exit prove the very point Tamron was making? This is the kind of TV moment that defines careers and destroys narratives. Let me know whose side you're on in the comments. And if you want more deep dives into the moments when the mask slips, hit like, subscribe, and ring the bell. You won't want to miss what we break down next.